Carter Ellison didn't expect his day to start with a flying sock hitting him square in the face. "Sorry, I didn't see you there," a breathless voice called from the top of the narrow apartment stairwell. He looked up, blinking at the sight of a laundry basket balanced against a woman's hip as she clutched a pair of jeans in her teeth. Her oversized hoodie had slipped off one shoulder, and her arms were wrapped around a tower of clothes that looked one shirt away from toppling. "It's fine," Carter said, stepping up. "You need help," the woman hesitated. Yeah, if you don't mind." He didn't. He really didn't. Carter took the basket from her, the weight of it nothing compared to what he was used to hauling at his construction job. She followed him down the stairs, barefoot, her long, dark hair tied in a lopsided knot. She had a laundry card in her hand and a confused look on her face as she glanced toward the machines in the basement. "First time using these?" Carter asked, setting the basket on the counter. "Yeah," she admitted, sheepish. "I just moved in yesterday." He offered a hand, his rough palms calloused from years of work. "Carter, I live in 2B. She took it, her hand warm and soft. "Gianna, 3A, nice to meet you, Gianna." She smiled, and something about it hit him harder than the sock. Carter wasn't used to women like her. She had an ease about her, like she didn't care what anyone thought. Most of the people in this building kept to themselves, but she was different. She didn't glance at his worn boots or the faded hoodie he'd thrown on over his work shirt. She didn't seem uncomfortable being in a dim basement with a stranger. She just smiled. He helped her load the machines, showed her which buttons to press, and explained the quirks of the place, how the dryer on the left never got hot enough, and how the card reader sometimes swallowed your credits. "You're a lifesaver," she said as she leaned against the counter. "I would have been down here for hours trying to figure it out. You'll get used to it. The building's old, but it's got character." "So do you," she teased lightly, and Carter raised an eyebrow. "I'll take that as a compliment. You should," she laughed, and it echoed in the basement, light and unexpected. Carter found himself grinning, which he hadn't done much lately. Not since his ex left last year, taking their 6-year-old daughter's stability with her. He'd been picking up extra shifts, patching drywall by day and bartending on weekends to keep up with rent, school supplies, and the endless list of things a single dad needed to cover. "Speaking of which, I should head back," he said, rubbing his hands on his jeans. "My daughter's upstairs." "Her babysitter's with her, but still." Gianna straightened. "You're a dad." "Yeah, her name's Violet. She's 6, loves dinosaurs and grilled cheese." Gianna smiled again, softer this time. "That's sweet. I bet she adores you." "She keeps me going," he admitted. There was a pause, a silence that didn't feel heavy, just thoughtful. "Well," Gianna said, brushing her fingers through her hair, "thank you again for helping, and saving my socks," he chuckled. "Anytime." As he turned to leave, she called after him, "Hey, Carter." He looked back. "Would you maybe want to grab a coffee sometime? As a thank you, or just because?" He blinked. He hadn't been asked out in years. Most women took one look at his beat-up truck and his packed schedule and ran the other way. "Yeah," he said slowly, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah, I'd like that." The next week passed fast. Gianna was everywhere. In the hallways, waving at him, on the front steps, chatting with Violet and complimenting her glittery sneakers. In the laundry room again, this time with a bag of quarters and a smug grin. Their coffee turned into lunch at a small diner where Carter paid in crumpled bills, and Gianna insisted on leaving the tip. Lunch turned into dinner, and then into evenings at the park with Violet. Gianna never flinched at the messiness of Carter's life. She didn't seem fazed by his tiny apartment or that he had to bring Violet along most places. She and Violet even started baking together on weekends, leaving his kitchen covered in flour and laughter. One night, after Violet had fallen asleep on the couch, Carter walked Gianna out. The breeze was cool, and she pulled her hoodie tighter around her. "I like this," she said quietly. "This? You, Violet, the noise, the normal." Carter looked at her, really looked at her. Something about her clothes, her easy smile, the way she never talked about work or bills. It didn't add up, but he didn't push. He liked her too much to scare her off. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked. Gianna hesitated. "No, I grew up in Manhattan, Upper East Side," he laughed. "So, this building must be a culture shock." "You have no idea," she said, grinning. "But I needed a change." The money, the events, the pressure. It got exhausting. I wanted to breathe. Carter nodded, understanding that all too well. She stepped closer. And then I met you and Violet. And this world that's nothing like mine but somehow feels more like home than anything else ever did. He swallowed hard. Gianna. She reached for his hand. I'm not running from who I am, but I am choosing who I want to be. And then she kissed him. Soft, sure, and so full of feeling it knocked the air right out of his lungs. When she pulled back, Carter stared at her. What was that for? For falling for the guy who helped me with my laundry, she said, eyes shining. Carter laughed, pulling her close again. You have no idea what you're getting into. Maybe, she whispered, but I know exactly what I want. And right now, all she wanted was him. The rain came out of nowhere. Carter had just finished patching a ceiling leak in a client's brownstone when the clouds split open. By the time he reached his truck, his shirt clung to his back and his boots squelched with every step. He drove home with the windows fogging, windshield wipers squealing. When he opened the apartment door, the scent of something sweet hit him first, warm vanilla, maybe cinnamon. Violet was sitting on the floor in her pajamas, a crown of purple pipe cleaners on her head, giggling at Gianna, who was crouched beside her, holding a lopsided cardboard castle. Is that a drawbridge? Carter asked, dripping water onto the rug. Gianna turned, her cheeks flushed. It was supposed to be. Violet insisted it needed a moat, so we improvised with blue tissue paper. Violet jumped up and ran over, launching herself into Carter's arms. Daddy, we made a kingdom. He scooped her up, ignoring the dampness of his shirt. I can see that, Your Majesty. Gianna stood, brushing glitter from her jeans. I hope it's okay. She asked if I could stay a little longer after school. Mrs. Tran had to leave early and I figured, I'm glad you did, Carter interrupted, meeting her eyes. She gave him a look he couldn't quite read, something between cautious and hopeful. Later, after Violet was tucked in and the apartment had quieted, he handed Gianna a dry hoodie from a clean laundry pile and motioned toward the balcony. The storm had passed, leaving the air thick with petrichor. They stepped outside, overlooking the narrow alley lit by flickering street lamps. Gianna leaned against the railing, hair damp from the humidity. I used to think quiet like this was boring, she said, voice low. Now I crave it. Carter folded his arms, watching her. Why'd you really leave? Gianna didn't answer right away. There was a man, she said finally. We were engaged. My family adored him, said he was perfect. Carter stayed silent, waiting. He was careful, she continued, never raised his voice. But he made me feel like I was always 2 steps behind, like I owed him something for loving me. Did he ever? No, her eyes flashed. But he didn't have to. Control doesn't always need bruises. Carter exhaled slowly. How long? 3 years. I left 6 months ago, cut off everything. My trust fund, the penthouse, the club memberships. I wanted to see if I could be someone without the Ellington name. The name hit him like a punch to the ribs. He didn't flinch, but the weight of it settled. Ellington, he repeated. She glanced sideways. You know it, only that your family owns half of Midtown and a few skyscrapers, Gianna shrugged. Exactly why I didn't lead with it. You didn't have to, Carter said. You were already more interesting than anyone I've met. She turned to him. You're not. Upset I didn't tell you. I'm not thrilled you had to hide it, but I get it. Gianna stepped closer, her fingers brushing the edge of his sleeve. I didn't plan on falling for anyone. Especially not someone who knows the price of milk. Carter chuckled, but there was something heavy behind his smile. I've got 2 jobs and a daughter who thinks I'm a superhero. I don't exactly fit into the world you came from. Good, she said simply. Because I never want to go back. He searched her face for any sign of doubt. There was none. Inside, Violet stirred in her sleep, and Carter's attention shifted instinctively. He always kept one ear open for her, even now, Gianna noticed. You never stop listening for her. She's all I've got. You're the best father I've ever seen, she said without hesitation. He looked away. I mess up more than I get it right. Gianna leaned in. You show up. You build her worlds out of cardboard. That's more than most. They stood like that for a long moment, close but not touching. The air between them was charged with something unspoken. I have to go to Boston tomorrow, she said suddenly. My father's company is launching a new project, and they expect me to make an appearance. Carter stiffened. You're going back, only for the weekend. They think I've been staying at a wellness retreat in Vermont if they knew I was living in a walk-up in Brooklyn." She trailed off, shaking her head. He didn't ask why she hadn't told them. He suspected the answer was the same reason she hadn't told him who she was right away, because for once she wanted to choose her life, not have it chosen for her. "You'll come back?" he asked. Gianna stepped toward him, placing a hand gently on his chest. "I'll always come back to you." Her words settled something deep inside him, something that had been restless for years. The door creaked open behind them. "Daddy," Violet's small voice broke the moment. She stood there, rubbing her eyes, her plush dinosaur clutched in one hand. "Bad dream," she murmured. Carter moved without hesitation, lifting her into his arms. Gianna reached over and tucked the blanket around her shoulder. "Will you stay with me?" Violet asked, her voice already fading. Carter nodded. "Of course." He carried her back to bed, whispering softly as he settled beside her. Gianna stood in the doorway, watching. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Later, when she left, she pressed a kiss to Carter's cheek, lingering just long enough for him to feel the hesitation in her breath. "I'll be back Sunday," she whispered. He nodded, and for the first time in years, he believed someone when they said they'd come back. The silence in the apartment on Sunday evening was unfamiliar. Carter stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a dish while Violet sat at the table, her chin resting in her hand as she colored a page full of planets with a set of worn markers. The hours had dragged since noon, when Gianna was supposed to return. No call, no knock, nothing. He didn't want to assume anything. People got delayed. Flights were late. Plans changed. But something gnawed at him, a quiet, persistent strain in his chest that hadn't been there before. He dried his hands and walked over to Violet. "You ready for your bath?" he asked gently. She held up her drawing, Saturn in purple, Earth in orange. "After I finish Mars." "All right, 10 minutes," she nodded, already diving back into her coloring. Carter ruffled her hair and stepped into the hallway. He pulled out his phone, staring at it for a beat before slipping it back into his pocket. He didn't have a number for her, not a real one anyway. She always just showed up. The following afternoon, she didn't. By Tuesday, Carter was pacing outside the building after dropping Violet off at school. He leaned on the railing, watching the street like she might suddenly appear in one of the cabs rolling by. But every face was a stranger. That night, he found himself standing outside apartment 3A. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. There was no sound inside, no flickering light beneath the door, no scent of baked goods or faint music, just stillness. He knocked anyway. Nothing. Back in his own apartment, Carter sat on the couch, staring at the wall. Violet had fallen asleep on his lap after dinner, curled up in her dinosaur pajamas. He didn't move her. He just watched the clock tick forward. On Thursday, she appeared, not at the door, not in the hallway, on television. Carter had stopped by the bodega after work to grab milk and a loaf of bread. The old TV behind the counter played one of those business channels on mute, closed captions rattling across the screen. But he didn't need sound to recognize her. Gianna, standing on a polished stage in a navy suit, her hair pulled back, flanked by her father and a team of executives. A banner across the bottom read, "Ellington Group unveils international expansion." She didn't look like the woman who built cardboard castles or danced barefoot in the kitchen. She looked like someone else entirely. The clerk handed him his change, but Carter didn't move. "She's something, huh?" the man said, following his gaze. "Daughter of the old guy, whole city's talking about her today." Carter blinked, gripping the bag tighter. "Yeah. She is." He left the store and walked home in the fading light. His boots scuffed against the sidewalk, his mind numb. By the time he got upstairs, Violet was in bed, and the babysitter handed him a crayon drawing of a rocket ship with the words for Miss Gianna scribbled in the corner. He stared at it for a long time. The next day, she came back. He opened the door to find her standing there, windblown and wide-eyed, with her coat half-buttoned and her purse hanging loosely from her shoulder. Her hair was down, wavy from the rain, and her eyes searched his face like she wasn't sure he'd let her speak. "I didn't want you to find out like that," she said. Carter stepped aside, jaw tight. "You mean on the news?" She stepped into the apartment slowly. "I was going to tell you, I had to be there. My father's team ambushed me. They told me I'd ruin the launch if I didn't stand on that stage. I didn't want any of it." You looked like you belonged, Carter said. Gianna turned toward him. That's the problem. I know how to fake it. I've been doing it my whole life. You disappeared, he said, voice low. No call, no message. Violet kept asking when you'd be back. Her face crumpled for a second before she smoothed it again. I didn't know how to explain. I thought if I just finished what they asked me to do, I could come back and pretend nothing happened. He shook his head. You're not the only one with something to lose. I know that, she whispered. That's why I came back. I care about her, about you, all of this. It wasn't just some escape for me, Carter. He ran a hand over his jaw, tension radiating from every inch of him. I didn't ask for perfection. I asked for honesty. She stepped closer. Then here it is. I have obligations I didn't choose, a legacy I didn't build. But the only time I felt like I was actually living was here with you, with Violet. I don't care about the board meetings or the penthouses. I care about cardboard castles and burnt cookies. Carter looked at her, eyes hard. So what are you saying? That you're done with all that. I'm saying I want to be with you, she said, voice steady. But not halfway, not when it's convenient. I walked away from that world once. I'll do it again, but I need to know it's not too late. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, you left without warning. That's not something I forget. Gianna's throat tightened. I don't have an excuse for that, but I'm here now, and I'm staying if you'll have me. The apartment was silent except for the sound of Violet's soft breathing from the other room. Carter crossed to the table, picked up the drawing she'd made, and handed it to Gianna. She made this Monday. Gianna took it in both hands, her fingers trembling slightly. She missed you, he said. I missed her more than I can explain. He watched her for a moment longer, then nodded toward the kitchen. You hungry? She blinked. What? I made too much spaghetti. Gianna's lip trembled, but she smiled. I'd love some. They didn't talk much after that. She helped him reheat dinner while he poured 2 glasses of water. They sat side by side, eating quietly, the tension melting into something simpler, something harder to define. Later, as she tucked Violet's drawing into her bag, Carter asked, You really done with all that? Gianna met his gaze. I'm not going back. I've already made arrangements to pull out of the expansion project. My father wasn't thrilled, but I don't care. I'm not willing to lose this. He studied her, really studied her, and for the first time since she'd left, he believed her. You're going to have to learn how to live on a budget, he said dryly. She grinned. I've started buying off-brand cereal. I think I can handle it. Carter laughed, the sound unexpected and warm, and just like that, something that had cracked between them began to mend. Not with grand apologies, but with honesty, with presence. With a drawing and a plate of overcooked noodles, small things. Real things. The kind of things that lasted. Gianna stood in the middle of Carter's living room, her arms wrapped tightly around a small, worn box. Inside were a few things Violet had given her over the past months, a macaroni bracelet, a folded paper heart, a photo drawn in crayon of the 3 of them holding hands under a blue sky. She hadn't known what to do with them when she was packing up her storage unit that morning, but she couldn't bring herself to throw them away. Now they felt like anchors. I signed the final paperwork today, she said, glancing up as Carter set a mug of tea beside her on the coffee table. It's official. I'm no longer part of Ellington Group's expansion board. He nodded, sitting beside her. You sure you're okay with that? I didn't even flinch, she said. Which is how I know I made the right choice. He leaned back, one arm resting behind her on the couch but not touching. What did your family say? My mother asked if I was having a quarter-life episode. My father didn't say anything at all, just sent me a statement to sign and a lawyer to make sure I wasn't suing for my shares. She gave a soft laugh. They treat emotions like contracts. Neither of them really know what to do when you break one. Carter hesitated. What about your apartment, or wherever you were staying before? I gave it up. I'm moving into a place a few blocks from here. It's small, but it has a view of the park. And I can afford it without a last name doing the heavy lifting. He turned toward her then, his expression unreadable for a moment. You're not doing this for me, right? He asked. Because I never wanted you to change your whole life just to fit into mine. I'm not changing, Gianna said, setting the box down. I'm choosing, that's different. Carter didn't speak right away. The air between them had shifted. There was no longer hesitation, no longer the question of if, only the weight of what came next. You still have that job interview, he asked, voice quieter now. Tomorrow morning, she said. Program assistant at the Community Arts Center. They're looking for someone to coordinate youth classes and summer events. I've never actually applied for a job before, not like this, but I want to. He smiled slowly. You'd be good at it. You think so? I've seen you organize 3 6-year-olds and a dog into a tea party. You've got the skills. Gianna laughed, leaning into his side just enough for her shoulder to brush his. You know, I used to think love looked like champagne toasts and red carpet photos, but now, he looked at her. Now it looks like grocery lists and bedtime stories. And someone who makes sure your tea isn't too hot when you're distracted. He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You're dangerous with words, Gianna L. Wait, are you still using Ellington? She tilted her head. Not anymore. I had it legally changed back to my mother's maiden name. Russo, Gianna Russo, he repeated. That suits you, feels right, she said. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Carter stood and opened the door to find Mrs. Tran, the babysitter, with Violet fast asleep against her shoulder. She didn't want to come home yet, Mrs. Tran whispered, but she passed out after dinner. Carter thanked her and gently lifted Violet into his arms. She stirred but didn't wake, wrapping her arms around his neck and mumbling something about a rocket ship. Gianna followed them to the bedroom, stopping in the doorway as he laid Violet down and covered her with the thin quilt she insisted on using year-round. She asked if you'd be at her school recital this weekend, Carter said, glancing back at Gianna. I wouldn't miss it. Her voice was steady. Back in the living room, Carter poured the last of the tea into her mug and handed it to her. I've been thinking, he said, pulling a small envelope from his back pocket. I didn't want to do this until I knew you were sure, until I was sure. Gianna took the envelope slowly. Inside was a piece of thick paper, folded once. She opened it. It was a hand-drawn invitation. In Violet's handwriting, please come to our family dinner, no fancy shoes required. Gianna blinked, her throat catching. You asked her to do this, she insisted, Carter said. I told her you were starting something new. She wanted to welcome you. Gianna held the paper like it was made of glass. Carter, this is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me. He took a breath. I wanted to ask you something else too, not a proposal, not yet. But something real. She turned toward him fully, her heart in her throat. I want to build a life with you, with Violet. I don't need anything perfect, I just want real, messy, honest, us. Gianna reached for his hand. Yes, you didn't let me finish, she grinned. Didn't have to. He leaned in then, kissed her slowly, deeply. No urgency, no questions left unanswered. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. This doesn't feel like the end of something. It's not, he said. It's the start of everything. 3 nights later, Gianna stood in the tiny kitchen of her new apartment, wearing an apron Violet had decorated with glue-on stars. Carter was stirring sauce at the stove while Violet set the table with unmatched plates and paper napkins. There were no chandeliers. No tuxedos, no cameras, just laughter and steam rising from the pots and the hum of a life being built from the inside out. After dinner, Carter stepped out onto the fire escape with Gianna, the city buzzing low beneath them. He wrapped his arms around her from behind as she leaned into him, her eyes closed against the breeze. You ever miss it? He asked. The world you left behind, she didn't hesitate. Only when I forget what I found in its place. He kissed her temple. And what's that? She turned in his arms, her gaze unwavering. Love in its truest form, the kind that doesn't ask you to earn it. Carter didn't speak. He just held her tighter, and in the quiet, the city faded away. They didn't need anything else, they already had everything. The lobby of the community center buzzed with after-school chaos, children darting around with paint on their sleeves, parents trying to corral backpacks and lunchboxes, and the faint sound of a piano drifting from the recital hall. Gianna stood at the front desk, her clipboard tucked under her arm, smiling as a boy proudly held up his clay dragon sculpture. You gave it wings this time, she said, crouching to his level. He beamed. Like you said. Dragons should always be ready to fly. That's right. She tapped her pen to the clipboard. Tell your mom I want a picture of it on the art wall. As he bounded off, Gianna straightened and met eyes with Carter, who had just stepped inside, Violet perched on his shoulders, her glitter-covered crown wobbling precariously. She insisted on arriving in style, Carter said, adjusting Violet's legs. I'm royalty now, Violet announced. Miss Gianna said so. Well, your kingdom awaits, Gianna replied, reaching up to remove the crown before it fell. And I think your dad's going to have to carry you to your throne. Violet giggled as Carter gently lifted her down. Where do we sit? Second row, Gianna said. Best view in the house. They made their way into the hall where folding chairs lined the polished floor. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, strung together by the kids earlier that week. A small stage stood at the front, decorated with cardboard stars and fabric curtains. Gianna stayed behind for a moment, taking it all in. This place, loud and imperfect, had become something more than a job. It was hers. As she stepped inside, the lights dimmed and the recital began. Violet was the second act, marching onstage in a silver tutu and delivering her lines with unshakable confidence. Carter watched with his hands folded tightly, his eyes never leaving her. And when Violet bowed, cheeks flushed with pride, he stood to clap before anyone else, his applause echoing above the rest. After the final performance, the crowd spilled into the hallway for juice boxes and snacks. Gianna handed out cookies and hugged parents who thanked her for organizing everything. She caught Carter's gaze across the room, and with a nod, he followed her through a side door, away from the noise. They stood beneath a string of fairy lights in the courtyard, where the quiet settled around them like a blanket. Gianna turned to him, her expression unreadable. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met that day in the laundry room? She asked. Carter leaned against the brick wall, arms crossed lightly. Sometimes, but not in a what-if way, more like realizing how close I was to missing something that changed everything. Gianna stepped closer, her voice softer. I wasn't looking for any of this, not you, not Violet. Not this messy, beautiful life. I know, he said. Neither was I. She looked up at him, eyes steady. But I want it all. I want to wake up in a place where I can hear the garbage trucks and the neighbor's dog barking. I want to plan birthday parties and pack lunches and argue about whether we need more dish soap. You forgot dance recitals where the punch tastes like melted popsicles, he added. Gianna smiled. And I want to do it with you. Carter stepped forward, brushing his thumb over her cheek. You're sure? I'm not scared of the hard days anymore. I'm scared of not having them with you. He didn't answer. He just kissed her slow, deliberate, and filled with every word he hadn't said yet. When they pulled apart, she leaned her forehead against his. I have something to show you, he murmured. Is it another child-made invitation? She teased. No, something better. He led her back inside, past the emptying hallway and into the staff room. On the table sat a small envelope with her name written in Violet's handwriting again, but this time it was addressed to Miss Gianna Russo Ellison. Gianna blinked. Wait, Carter pulled out a folded piece of paper. It's not what you think, no rings, yet, but I did some research. Turns out I can legally add your last name to mine if I want, and I do. Because this family, this life, it's not just yours or mine anymore, it's ours. Gianna stared at him, her breath caught in her throat. You want to be an Ellison. I want to be a Russo Ellison. Because you're not starting over, Gianna. You're building something new, and I want to carry that name with you. She pressed her hand over her mouth, overwhelmed. I didn't know I needed that, she whispered. He kissed her again, gently. That's what love is, isn't it? Giving each other things we didn't know we were missing. The next few weeks passed in a blur of quiet joy. Carter's construction clients referred him to new jobs, and he began managing a small team, working fewer nights and spending more weekends with Violet and Gianna. Gianna's art programs expanded, and the community center offered her a full-time position as youth director. She accepted, with a smile that made the center's board member say, "You might just save this place." One Saturday morning, they moved into a ground-floor apartment a few blocks from the center. The walls were bare, the dishwasher made a strange noise when it ran, and the backyard was barely more than a patch of grass and a worn-out swing set. But it was theirs. On their first night, Violet insisted they eat dinner on the floor. They spread out a blanket, passed around grilled cheese sandwiches, and toasted with apple juice in plastic cups. To our new castle, Violet said. To our home, Gianna added, raising her cup. Carter looked at the two of them, his girls, his world. to everything we never saw coming. Years later, they'd still talk about that night, the first of many. The night everything finally felt settled. One spring morning, Gianna stood in the backyard, helping Violet hang paper lanterns for her 10th birthday. Carter stepped out, holding a tray of lemonade, his face sunburned from fixing the fence. "You think she'll remember all this when she's older?" he asked. Gianna tucked a lantern string behind her ear. "She'll remember the feeling of being loved. Of being safe. That's what matters most, isn't it?" She turned to him, her eyes full. "Yes, and the fact that we did it together." Carter set the tray down and pulled her into his arms, the clatter of children's laughter echoing from inside. He kissed her forehead and held her close, steady as always. They had built something real, not perfect, not easy, but true. And every single day they chose it all over again.